But if we boil it down to staying close to Jesus in each day, you got to ask two simple questions. Like, what is it that you want to say to me today? You're asking Jesus that. What does he have to say to you? That's a beautiful question. And then, what do you have for me today to do? Who can I serve? Like, however you want to phrase that next question. It's like, how would you like to use me today?
Welcome to Follower of One, where faith meets real work. We're a global community helping others move one notch closer to Jesus. Wherever you are, that's your mission field. You are a missionary. Welcome back, Follower of One friends. My name is Addison Williams. Very excited to have a special guest today, Don Apuan. Don, it's great to have you on the call today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Absolutely. So, of course, through all of the connections, we landed through Follower of One, but most importantly, you're living out your faith in the marketplace. And so, before we jump in to a conversation, I'd love to just quickly introduce you. You wear a couple of really cool hats that I'm excited to talk about. Being an expert copywriter and marketing strategist, you're a former pastor and nonprofit executive director, which now your mission with Copy Queens Inc., which is you're the CEO and founder of, you really are on a mission to help Christian business owners establish their authority and sell out even their most expensive offers with brilliant messaging. So, Don, you've got a really cool resume that I'd love to jump into. But first and foremost, Copy Queens Inc. I've got to know, how did you come up with what the
With that name.
name? Tell me the origin story of Copy Queens Inc.
That's such a great question that no one has ever asked me before. I love it. How did I come up with it? So years ago, this might have been, I would say summer of probably 22. I was at a mastermind in LA and chatting with the ladies there. And it just sort of came to me like Dawn Copy Queen, which at that point I had just changed my Instagram handle to be Dawn Copy Queen. I was like, oh, the Copy Queen, I like it. I had the Copy Hive, and I had a coaching program, and Abundant Copy Queens was another. Some of it was inspired by the fact that the marketing space is so bro heavy. Many times was either the only girl in the room or one of a handful. Like I could count other girls in the room of hundreds of people for groups, like events that I attended, or even Zoom calls. There are not a lot of female copywriters or marketers, although there are more now. But a few years ago, it was not quite as common. So I think it came out of that, just like, no, I'm the queen. I'm good at what I do. And so I claimed the queen instead of king, obviously. And then it just sort of stuck, and people started calling me the copy queen. And my clients loved that. And among other things, calling me like the funnel fairy and the word wizard. But copy queen stuck. And then after that is when I changed doing business as Copy Queens Inc. with a K, not a C, to do a play on incorporated, but really it's ink, like the old school writing copy with actual ink before the advent of online. So, yep, that's how it came to be.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, I have to say, you mentioned Wizard, and then what was the other one that you had?
Uh,
Creative? You
the
just said
the funnel fairy. A
the
lot of my
Funnel
clients call
Fairy.
me that.
Yes.
I fixed a lot of funnels that have been live for months and not making money at all. They would come to me and then I would fix it. And they would just call me the funnel fairy because they'd be like, I don't know what magic you sprinkled on there, but they would just suddenly start getting sales within 24 hours of me changing the copy.
Yeah, that's awesome. So with that, I have to know, do you still have those domains? Because those are like phenomenal website names as well.
I do not have Word Wizard or Funnel Fairy. I should see if they're available.
You should see if they're available. If not, they're probably at least 5,000. But hey, it might be worth it. So I have to say, just to preface the conversation, this is all about faith and work. But I have to ask, when did your passion for writing and this love for copywriting, was that a learned skill? Was that something that you've always had a knack for? What's kind of your journey through obviously being a former pastor? Would love to just allow you to tie that in to where you are today.
Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily go together with pastoring, but it does. There is a connection. So, from a young age, I loved writing. My nerd moment when I was turning 10, all I asked for my birthday was a desk because I wanted to write my stories. So, I've been a writer as long as I can remember. I still have some of my third grade composition, black and white speckled books. It's atrocious writing, but I was trying at that
Yeah.
age. Grew up, loved that. And then as a pastor, I was writing sermons. My husband and I co pastored. So I was preaching every other Sunday, leading Bible studies every week. So a lot of writing is involved from that extent. And then I also was writing grants and things like that for the nonprofit. So still using my writing, but I always thought that actually being a writer, quote unquote, was not a very lucrative job. Like you couldn't make a living out of it, basically. Because what you hear is, oh, well, authors don't sell very many books unless you're J.K. Rowling or somebody like that. And when I was a pastor and I had my daughter, she was a year old. And at that point, things within the organization went a little bit south. They decided that my husband and I were failures because our church wasn't big enough. And so they demoted us and put us under other pastors, technically. And from there, it just got really abusive and really unhealthy for us. So I started Googling work from home and I was like, well, I'm a good writer. What could I do? Is there anything I could do with writing or transcription? Or, I looked at everything. And what I stumbled into was somebody's funnel from a Facebook ad that was for digital marketing. And I was like, huh, this is interesting. Maybe I could do this. So I became an affiliate marketer, learned how to build funnels, run Facebook ads, kind of all the things. And then through that, my funnels and my ads always did really well. And people in that community started asking me, they're like, hey, can you help me with my ads? Or hey, can you help with the landing page? Because yours is doing better than mine. And then about a year into that, probably, I was on a Zoom, like another completely separate Zoom call with somebody, and she was talking about being a website copywriter. And I was like, do you mean to tell me that you just get paid to write for these online businesses? And she's like, yeah. And she was charging, I don't know, like $10,000, I think, for a website at that point in time. And I thought that was awesome. And I'm like, yes, let's do that. Not necessarily just with websites, but I was okay at it. Like, and I had never heard of the term before in that sense. I mean, I knew what copyright was, the little C in the circle, but it's totally separate. And after that call, I was like, okay, maybe I can just write for people instead of doing affiliate marketing and things like that. And those skills, though, came really in handy because people who needed copywriting were like, oh, you know how to build my funnel too? And I was like, yeah, that was a great upsell because they'd be, oh, I have ClickFunnels. I'm like, no problem. I can build that for you and write the whole thing. So, yeah, that was September 6th, 2019. I just declared myself a copywriter and took a bunch of courses, of course, so that even though I was a natural at it, I bought a ton of courses to give myself more of that confidence. But right away, my clients were getting crazy good results, whether it was sales or increasing lead conversions with landing pages converting at like 40% or higher. And then some of those funnels getting sales every single day. And so from that, it also grew my confidence. And I went on to, I think I hit six figures after 11 months of just copywriting once I was like, I'm a copywriter. And then the second year, I doubled it and just kept going from there and really feeling like God was just blessing because by that point in time, we had stepped out of the ministry because they wanted me to put my daughter in full time childcare. And I just couldn't do it. I was having panic attacks. My husband thought I was going to take my life. It was a very dark time when I started my business so that I could be home with my baby. And ultimately, we were able to leave ministry because of that so that I could raise her. Now she gets to go to a private school. And I just have had so many options and choices because of money and because of my business, and that it's done well enough for our family to make those decisions that we think are best for our daughter. And I honestly think I impact more people for the Lord now than I ever did. Our church was small, not that small is bad, but we would have 30 or 40 people on a given Sunday. And now I get to impact hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives through the copy that I write for myself and for my clients. I've always seen that as a really cool ripple effect that I get to be part of. So, and all of my clients have been in the spiritual space or transformation, like they're all trying to make the world a better place. So it's cool to get to be part of that ripple effect by the writing that I do so that they sell more and impact more people.
Yeah, that's awesome. We've always said that the marketplace is, I mean, Billy Graham said the next wave ministry will be in the marketplace. And so just leveraging that, the impact, even my pastor was talking about it on Sunday in terms of how people are impacted through the church. But the reality is, we spend less than 2 hours on average in a church building week over week. So that means that our life is spent outside the church walls. And so being able to impact through transformation. So there are a couple of different directions I would love to take, Don, because you bring up a lot of really key elements to your story that I'm sure would encourage the listeners. And one lane that I'd love to just piggyback off is, in your journey, you really identified asking for a desk at 10 years old. I just love it. But practically, you step into that. It's like, man, I love to write, I love to read, be creative. And I think that there's a lot of suppressed people in the marketplace today that they really can't be creative because they're in the marketplace. So, my first question would really be for those people that might be in a job where it's like, man, I'm not fulfilling all of what I really enjoy doing. Now, granted, you're never going to be 100% in the marketplace. For you, you're like, man, chain of events, I'm writing, I'm staying consistent with that. And then boom, ministry happens. And it's like, let's pivot. But you already had that. So, what about the people that may or may not have that? How would you encourage them to go and find that?
Yeah, oh, I like it. And I will say one thing real quick. Yes, I was a writer, but copywriting was completely brand new. So I think you can identify some skills that you have that could be applied to a completely new arena. And that's where just thinking outside the box and going to God. I 100% believe that any business that's built on God as the foundation, God will direct our steps. He'll open doors, he'll close doors. People hear my story, and we often have a lot of conversations about being a victim in it and how I chose victimhood and what a shame it is that we were treated that way. Like I was laughed at and mocked when I wanted to be home with my daughter, and he told me, "What would you possibly do if you didn't work for us?" That was June 13th. Oh, I remember the day, that moment. And it was just not nice. It was not kind. It was not very godly of him. But we didn't have a choice of what we do with any of our circumstances. So in the marketplace, if you're not doing something that you love, that lights you up, I really believe that God gave all of us gifts and skills, and they're not always the same. And if we're looking for it and if we're open to it, God will open those doors. And he kind of did have to speak through the megaphone of pain for me before I woke up and was like, oh, I'm supposed to have a business. And it was obviously because I highly valued family, and family came before my career. And so I gave up my career to be with my child. And so that was sort of the catalyst that forced me to pursue this other skill and this gift. And literally, the skill was not necessarily a skill I had. Writing is very different than copywriting. I had to learn that, and it took discipline to stay up every night after my daughter went to bed. I'd put her to bed, and then I'd work for 2 or 3 hours. Then I'd get up early, like an hour before she would get up, and I'd learn some more. So, if you want something bad enough, anything is possible. Like, I absolutely believe that the limit doesn't exist, that we serve an infinite God. And it's a lot of times our own finite thinking of, I don't have enough time because I have kids, or I'm in a 9 to 5, or whatever myriad of reasons. You can have your reasons or you can have your dream, and you get to choose. And I was consistently making that choice of, okay, I'm going to sacrifice now so that I can have the life that I feel God calling me to, and a life in alignment with my values. My husband and I had the privilege of seeing Jordan Peterson live a couple years back. And one of the things that he said, and he isn't necessarily outwardly Christian, he talks a lot about the Bible and about faith and knows more about the Bible, I think, than the majority of Christians, to be honest, because he studied it so much. But, anyways, he said, like, almost ready to leave the stage. And I really believe that was like the one thing I was meant to hear that night. He said, success is atonement. And when you break down the word atonement, it means at one meant or at one with yourself. And I added to it and my creator. So when we're at one with ourselves, meaning we're in alignment with ourselves and God, just think he opens the pathway. But so often it's our own mindset that blocks us because we don't see that something's possible or we don't know the full plan. I'm such a planner. I like to be in control. I like to know everything. Like if I was back at Bible times, I'd be like, God, can you give me a map of the wilderness in the next 40 years? So I just know like each one of these stops. I like to plan it all, but God often doesn't. He called Abraham and just said, go. He didn't say where he was going or when he was going to stop. He just said, go, I will make you the father of many nations. And so I'm not saying like quit your job today and go. I bridged it. I started my business while I was still in a 9 to 5, and then I quit as soon as my business could fund our lifestyle. But so I'm not saying that, but I think it's just like that openness to hear God speak and to be willing to see things differently, be willing for God to do radical miracles in your life. I think I'm super passionate about miracles. So, and I think we miss a lot of them because we're not looking.
The Bible does say God is the miracle worker. So we should step into that, not to be like over spiritual in that statement that I just made. But Don, you did say one thing about your reasons and the dream. What is your dream? I'd say that the reasons that you have, that is why you continue in the dream. I mean, we all have a dream and we should all have reasons as to why we are dreaming for whatever that is, whether it's starting a business, whether it's being for employees, whether that's going to management and then senior leadership. We all have or should have things that we are dreaming about. But dreaming is this intangible thing that we wake up and it's like we forget what we dreamt. But if we really write it down, I mean, that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about magical unicorns and rainbows, but we're practically talking about whenever you have the diligence to think of ways that God can work and move in your life, the dream then becomes a reality because you have the tangible things of, I like to write, I like to read. I'm going to use those skills to better myself and be smarter. And then I'm going to use that to grow a business and scale a business. I love what you said. And then you went on to talk about success. Jordan Peterson is phenomenal. I was on a road trip, so I binged his podcast. But there was one moment, it was a live podcast in a seminary, and it was a very emotional podcast for him. And you mentioned or allude to this idea of he does talk about the Bible, but that's true. And the more that I think through your story, the more I'm even reminded of the personal journey I've been on the past 2 weeks, where we just started a new series at church called Voices and Choices. And the most important thing of that is two questions. One, what is your internal voice telling you day in and day out? John Acuff has talked about soundtracks. I mean, it's the same thing, right? The way that we talk about our same thoughts over and over again, and it continues to exhaust us. But then also, the point that I would make is who are your external voices? Because that plays a huge part into what comes internal and then how we think about ourselves and quite frankly, what our dreams and aspirations might even be.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I would probably say the internal is more important. Obviously, who we surround ourselves with is important too, but sometimes you don't have that, if that makes sense. Like, I didn't necessarily have anybody in my life who was an example of an entrepreneur. nobody who could, until I started reading and got introduced to Tony Robbins, and that sort of just went from one thing to the next. And then I joined masterminds and courses and things like that. So that came later to some extent, but we still don't always have family that supports us or that believes in our dreams. Like my husband isn't necessarily the same level of dreaming. I think he, in lots of ways, is probably more like I would say most Christians who settle for life the way it is, if that makes sense. This idea of life just kind of happens to us. We grow up, we get a job, we get married, we have kids, we have a house, sort of that normal thing. But in that, I used to relate it to like floating down a river and just going with the flow. Whereas when this happened to me, it was like I stood up in the current and I started walking the opposite way, which takes effort and takes work. And it took me changing that internal soundtrack in order for the outward to start changing. And I didn't always have people. It was easier when I had people around me. Who is it that says the five people? Is that Jim Rohn? It's like the five
You're the sum of
people
the
you have
five people you
surrounding
surround
you.
yourself with.
Yeah. Yes, that's the one. So, I mean, it's important, but I think the most important is that internal, because that is the thing that stops us before we even start. I think for a lot of Christians, like you said, if they're those who might be listening that are in a job that maybe is not living their passion, a lot of times we kind of think our situation is set or there's no way out. Or, I mean, even that's the case with my husband and I. When we left the ministry, we made a combined $2,600 a month cash. And we lived in a house that was fully furnished and drove cars provided by the organization. So all of this stuff was provided for us. Our taxes were paid, all the house bills were paid, like utilities and things like that. And then we had the cash allowance for food and clothes and things like that. But to leave that, because we were making a rather small amount of money, both of us working full time, it took like Herculean effort for us to get out, to find a place to live, to buy cars, to find jobs, like all the things that we had to do. And a lot of people in that situation have talked to us and they're like, oh, it's impossible. These are other pastors. We're doing what we did. And they'll talk to us and be like, how did you get out? How did you do that? And it's not easy, but if you set your mind to anything, you can do it. And I believe that God still directed my steps and that he still blessed us through that process. But a lot of people are still stuck with those negative soundtracks of, I don't have time, I don't have money, I should be grateful for this job. Those kinds of stories where we forget, hey, we serve an impossible God who enabled Jesus to rise from the dead. Don't you think that's pretty powerful? Don't you think he could figure out something else for like a different job or a different position? I remember one of my favorite college professors, one day he was passionately preaching about revelation and how we live parenthetically, meaning like parentheses, we live in these subsections of our lives and very small minded. And he said, why are you forgetting the end? Like we know the rest of the story. We know that Jesus conquers everything. I mean, out not even just the resurrection, which we are on this side of, but we know the end of the story too, and we know that he wins ultimately. And so why are we living like he hasn't won already? And I think that's where a lot of Christians get stuck, is we forget that power.
Well, I think it's that plus identity. I mean, that's what it goes back to. That's who your internal voice tells you who you are day in and day out. It's identity. Who am I? And then once you understand that and you're able to unpack, that's when you start to understand God is who he says he is. And we're not talking prosperity gospel here, just to be clear, but this idea of, yes, absolutely. If you have faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. And we are very finite in our thinking. I remember one time when I was in the marketplace and I was ultimately in a dark season. And I was telling myself, right, I come from an athletic background. So the mindset that I used to have being competitive baseball, finding myself in a position where I'm like, what am I doing here? but yet I still didn't take action because it was not so much as a comfort position. It was more so the reality, what am I going to do? And then I think that people, you mentioned affiliate marketing. I myself have done affiliate marketing and direct sales. I think whenever we find ourselves in those positions, it's very easy to see a Facebook ad and buy the course thinking that course is going to solve your problem.
Yeah.
When the reality is, we need to do an internal self check to say, before we get on social media and click the course, which I'm for courses, right? I mean, it's learning, but before you click the course, looking at, oh man, this is great. Understand number one, why are you going to take the course? And number two, does it really fit into what you're passionate about doing and what you're interested in? Because we could all take a course on, for instance, if you sell a copywriting course, we could all take a copywriting course, which I'm sure would be phenomenal, but only those that are really interested in copywriting should take your copywriting course. And I think that's what gets us off track because we see all of these things that society says, hey, go be successful doing this or go be successful doing that. When in reality, God is just telling us, hey, slow down a minute and
Mhm.
understand who you are in Christ. And very clearly, whenever you start opening that Dusty Bible, it's a great song, by the way, Dusty Bibles, and we wonder why
Mhm.
everybody's on our iPhones. Fantastic. Everybody's
Yeah.
got a new iPhone, but everybody's got Dusty Bibles too. We'll let that one sink in. This idea that God is exactly what you're talking about, Don. This idea, whenever you understand, hey, God says that he will move and he will work for you. It's very clear. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, right? Man thinks about his steps. God guides our hearts. But then also be fishers of men. I mean, let's be real. Let's talk about discipleship in the marketplace for a minute. If you know who you are in Christ, it's going to be very easy to love on your neighbor and be a friend.
Yeah. Yep.
Get out of the boat.
100%. Get out of the boat, even if it means sinking and looking to Jesus and calling out to him,
I
because you
mean,
know he'll
calling out in
save
the
you.
flood as I have the ocean as my background today. I'm walking on
Yes.
water. But even so, right? The disciples, they weren't disciples yet, but then God called them. He said, hey, drop your nets, come and be fishers of men. They didn't know
Mm-hmm.
what he was doing. It goes back to what you said, just go. You might not know, but when you have that conviction of, hey, God's talking, or I'm reading and this is just impacting my spirit. That's what we're talking about here. It might be small. That's okay. But you grow into the bigger visions, the bigger reasons why. And
Yeah.
it's a fun journey.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that because it is the journey and it's who we become in the process. It's not that destination at the end, right? Like I think so many people think of it as like, oh, the promotion or the job or the business or the money. And it's not about that. It's who do you become in the process? Who do you get to be to have XYZ, whatever that dream is? And it's really easy to lose sight that the most important thing is who we are becoming in Christ, which is back to that identity piece.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you mentioned that. You actually stole one of my questions. You partially answered it, but I did want to double down on it because it is important that people hear this. You've mentioned through your journey of entrepreneurship the success that you've had. And I would love for you to cast a vision as to, with all of the success you had, because you did just say it's not all about the money. Money is great. We understand that it does solve problems and it does bring solutions, but then it's transactional, right? Money goes, money comes in, etc. So my question is this, Don, how have you been able to stay grounded in your faith? I mean, you came from the nonprofit world, moved into the corporate world as an entrepreneur, but then you've had a lot of success and you also work with a lot of people that are transforming lives in whatever capacity they're doing that. How do you personally stay grounded in your faith, seeing the success that you've had?
Yeah, it can lure, as I say, of money and shiny objects and things is definitely there. But it's something I've been passionate about. Like, how do we keep our eyes on Jesus? That was one of the songs we sang on Sunday. It was turn your eyes upon Jesus. Very simple chorus, but it's so easy, especially I think in entrepreneurship, to be focused on money and the hustle for it. So for me, it's really been that daily quiet time with God. And whether that's journaling or just prayer time, it's usually a combination for me. I have between scripture, journaling, prayer time, like listening to what God is speaking, asking questions. I like doing interactive journaling. So I'll ask God a question and then write what he's saying. And just that willingness of every day saying, okay, God, lead me to who you want me to serve today. If God is the foundation of everything and we start our day that way, and which sounds like so Christian cliche, right? And I honestly have not done this every single day of my entrepreneur journey. I've had some low days where I was literally like face on the ground crying. It has been rough. Even though I've had a lot of success, there's been a lot of hit time as well in it, and uncertainty and needing to trust God that he'll be faithful. I went a stretch of time where I didn't have income for 4 months and I was the sole breadwinner for my family. So it has not been all sunshine and unicorns, but through that all, I stay grounded in that relationship with God. And there's for sure tools. I use tapping. I get out in nature every day and I walk. There are things that I believe God has given to help us have reminders of his faithfulness and to stay grounded in him because it's hard. We're in the storms of life. He doesn't guarantee that, in fact, he says it will be hard. He's not like, oh, you'll get saved and then life is just going to be easy. He's like, no, you're going to have many trials of many kinds. And like you were saying earlier with that Billy Graham said, I too believe that business is the place to expand the kingdom of God. I think we have the greatest opportunity to make the biggest difference and the biggest impact in the world. But obviously, the devil knows that. The devil wants to distract us with a million other things to do. The devil wants to take us from our quiet time with God and fill our brains with social media and distract us from working on ourselves. I think a lot of people work on business or their job or whatever, but that then takes away from inner work. We get so busy doing the work, even if it's marketplace work of God, all those things. But if we're neglecting the inner work, then the devil's winning because there's no staying the same. It's back to that river, right? We're either drifting away from God or we're actively moving closer to him. We don't just stay stagnant and still in our walk with God. It has to be something that we're continually working on, just like we work our muscles every day, or else we lose the ability to use them. Is the same with spiritual. So, again, I have not been perfect in it. I've had my trips and falls, but that has been the thing that's always seen me through. Like when I come back to God, when I'm like, oh, yeah, this is where I'm grounded, things always work out. Yeah.
It goes back to courage. Are we really having courage to step into the roles and responsibilities that we have today and then move into, hey, not only am I doing the best at work, but also am I really having the courage to bring my faith into that? I had a great conversation with a friend of mine that said she was talking about sports teams. She was like, we're very encouraged to rep our sports flag, but are we really interested or willing or have the courage to rep our Jesus flag? And I know that we're going to have that courage to rep our Jesus flag the more time we spend with God in that quiet time of what you were talking about, getting out of this idea that the marketplace is the end all be all in terms of where my fulfillment comes in. But it's whenever we're able to get outside into nature and we're able to do our job well, right? I mean, the Bible calls us to be excellent and do great work, but then practically we can find other fulfillment And through that of having courage, we can be a light to others. We can be a witness to others because as we step into the quiet time, as we step into the great chorus, by the way, of the song that you didn't sing to us, but the chorus of what you just said, the most important thing is how can we bring God into our thoughts? How can we bring God into the reasons why we go to work and do the things we do for our family, our friends, our coworkers, and then execute that? And it all comes down to courage. How can we move the needle as practically as we can, day in and day out, while we're doing great work in the marketplace? And I love what you said, Don. I love how you've shared your story and really been intentional about it because it is easy of falling whenever you do have that success or whenever you focus so diligently on one thing that it's oftentimes easy to zoom in and hyper focus. But if we keep that perspective, step back, take a breath, get right with God daily, then those decisions, the bigger checks as we hit bonuses in the marketplace or start our own businesses, but because it's a little bit of an easier pill to swallow if we have that foundation.
Yeah, yeah. And one thing I didn't mention in that daily time is almost every day I read Deuteronomy 8, which often you'll see just verse 18 highlighted, which is for his God who gives me the ability to grow wealth. And very applicable to business. But if you read the whole chapter, it gives the context of that. And really, when we acknowledge that it is God who brings the blessings financially or a promotion, it doesn't have to be your own business, but that it's God, and that we remind ourselves of that frequently. Just like the Israelites were forgetful, we can get forgetful. And that is why the Old Testament frequently says, remember your history, write it down. So we
Yeah,
write down and go back to that every day because we are fickle people. We start thinking, oh, well, I made those changes to the funnel, or oh, I thought of that idea and now it's making lots of money. It's like, no, it all starts with God and we give it to Him each day. So that helps keep me grounded as well.
that is really good. The foundation is key. So, Don, for those that are listening, we've said a lot of really great things. And throughout the thread of what you've been talking about, your diligence and your quiet time, which is of utmost importance, but then also this idea of serving others, I think that's one of the biggest things that I see as a through line for you and your business and how you've really been able to serve people well. So let's bring it full circle. For those that are listening, being in the marketplace, what would be an encouragement that you would give somebody, whether it's from a frontline employee to a CEO or high level executive that might be listening to this, as an entrepreneur who has really had an awesome story to share? What's an encouragement to the listeners today?
Hmm. Oh, there's so many things I could share. I would say
We still have time.
ultimately stay close to Jesus, right? Having that daily communication with Him, which is prayer, one of the five. And then service is big for me. And I do think that we're all called to serve. But if we boil it down to staying close to Jesus in each day, you got to ask two simple questions like, what is it that you want to say to me today? You're asking Jesus that. What does He have to say to you? That's a beautiful question. And then, what do you have for me today to do? Who can I serve? Like, however you want to phrase that next question. It's like, how would you like to use me today? And if you're asking those two things, the first one is going to give you that identity in Him because He's going to love on you every time, right? Which gives you the courage and the confidence to then go out and do what He says. That's the second part. If you ask the question and He tells you, then you better go do it or be open to Him bringing things your way. as I call God winks, all these miraculous things that happen that can be explained no other way besides God. And that those things will start happening when we open up ourselves to that possibility. He will start moving. But I think it starts with us every day. So stay close to Jesus.
Amen. I'm practically living that out. And how can we stay close to Jesus? And I think that goes back to one specific tagline, if you will. It's a value statement, but hungry humility. Just this idea of you can be hungry, which is great because that determines that you're driving towards something, but then also have the humility to take a breath, zoom out, do whatever you need to do for whatever you might be facing, because James is very clear. James is like the rock star book of the Bible. I'm been talking about it at church, and then I'm about to start rereading it for the umpteenth time. But just this idea of we're all going to have trials and tribulations, but there's all a plan. There's all a perspective that we can take. We talked about the inner voices and etc. But you can't do any of that if you don't put the cherry on top of stay close to Jesus. And that's a great theme to just celebrate today. At Follower of One, we encourage people to live out their faith every day on mission in the marketplace, wherever you are. And Don, it's an encouragement not only to see how you're living out your faith every day where you are, but just moving the needle and being an encouragement to those clients that you have that are then transitioning and impacting clients, et cetera. The ripple effect goes on. I'm not going to be the creator of this, but there was a business owner that was having a conversation with a pastor. And the business owner was running, let's just say for sake of story, $1 million business. But whenever they practically broke that down, small company, $1 million business, small company in air quotes for those that can't see me, breaking down how many clients and families and people in the community that they served, it was over 15,000 people in terms of opportunity. The opportunity is endless for those that are in the marketplace. As you step out, as you go to buy your coffee in the coffee shop, or you're sitting at a work table, everybody that you come into contact is just a little glimpse of Jesus. And Jesus said that if you do this for me, you'll do this for the least of these. And so as we close out, just remember Don's words of be intentional, be close to Jesus, and don't be afraid to ask Jesus questions. Don, I got that from your stories too. Don't be afraid to ask Jesus what's up. I think that's something that we should remember.
Yes. Do it.
Do
It's
it.
amazing.
You heard it from myself and Don. Ask Jesus what's up and see where he sends you into the marketplace. So for now, this is Addison Williams. Don, thank you so much for being a great guest on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Likewise.
All right, that's it for this episode of Follower of One. Please share with a friend. And if you are living out your faith in the marketplace, you are on mission every day. We'll see you next time. As you go, live your faith with intention. Pray, appreciate others, know what you believe, serve others, speak for yourself. These small steps shape a faithful life. Wherever God has placed you, walk it out with courage. You are a missionary.